to bet that somewhere along the way you broke it. Not because you're a bad person, not because you lack character, but because the promise you made to yourself is the one promise in your life that has no witness, no contract, no consequence you can see. And so you let it slide. Now here's what I want you to sit with tonight. If you made a promise to a business partner and you gave your word that you'd deliver something by Friday, you'd move heaven and earth to deliver it. You'd stay up late. You'd cancel other plans. You'd do whatever it took because your reputation was on the line, because someone was watching, because there was a cost to failing. But when the promise is to yourself, all of that evaporates. There's no partner waiting. There's no reputation on the line, at least not one anybody else can see. And so the promise to yourself becomes the most breakable promise you own. And this is one of the great tragedies of a human life, because the promises you make to yourself are the ones that actually determine your future. Every promise to another person shapes your relationships. But the promises you make to yourself, those shape who you become. Think about what a self-promise really is. It's a moment where you looked at your life and you saw something you wanted to change. You saw a version of yourself that was better, stronger, healthier, further along. And you said, I'm going to become that person. That's not a small thing. That's you casting a vote for your own future. And every time you break that promise, you're not just skipping a task. You're voting against the person you said you wanted to be. Now, most people don't see it that way. Most people think a broken self-promise is harmless. They think, well, I only let myself down. Nobody else got hurt. And that phrase, I only let myself down, is one of the most dangerous phrases in the human vocabulary. Because it treats you like you don't matter. It treats your word to yourself like it's worth less than your word to anyone else. And I want to ask you something. If your word to yourself is worth less than your word to a stranger, what does that say about how you value yourself? What does that say about the respect you have for your own future? Because the person you're letting down when you break a self-promise isn't some abstract idea. It's you, the real you, the one who has to live with the results. Here's what I've come to understand over the years. The reason people can't keep promises to themselves isn't a willpower problem. It isn't a motivation problem. It's a trust problem. And trust is the whole game. Let me explain what I mean. When you make a promise to yourself and you keep it, something quiet but powerful happens. You prove to yourself that your word means something. You build a little evidence that says, when I say I'll do something, I do it. And the next time you make a promise, you believe it a little more because you have a track record. But when you make a promise and break it, the opposite happens. You gather evidence that says, my word to myself doesn't mean much. And here's the terrible part. The next time you make a promise, some part of you already knows you won't keep it. You've heard yourself make promises before and watched yourself break them. So even as you're making the new promise, there's a quiet voice in the back of your mind that says, sure, we'll see. That voice is the sound of broken trust. That's the sound of a person who has stopped believing their own word. And once you reach that point, you can make all the promises you want, but none of them will have any power because you've trained yourself not to take yourself seriously. So the real work here isn't learning how to force yourself to do things you don't want to do. The real work is rebuilding the trust between you and yourself, one kept promise at a time, until your word becomes something you can actually rely on again. And I want you to understand how that trust got broken in the first place. Because most people don't know. They think they broke their promises because they were weak. But that's not usually what happened. What usually happened is that they made promises that were impossible to keep. And then they blamed themselves when they couldn't keep them. Think about the last big promise you made to yourself. Was it small and specific, or was it enormous and vague? Most people, when they decide to change, make a promise the size of a mountain. They say, I'm going to completely transform my body. They say, I'm going to become a totally different person. They say, starting tomorrow, everything changes. And that kind of promise feels wonderful in the moment. It feels bold. It feels inspiring. You go to bed that night feeling like a new person already. But that promise is a trap because it's too big to keep. And the moment you fail to keep it, the whole thing collapses. You don't just fall short. You fall off completely. And you use the falling off as evidence that you can't be trusted. So the first thing I want to teach you tonight about keeping a promise to yourself is this. Make promises you can actually keep. Make them small enough that failure is almost impossible. Because a small promise kept is worth more than a large promise broken. A small promise kept builds trust. A large promise broken destroys it. Most people have this exactly backwards. They think the bigger the promise, the better the person. They think ambition is measured by the size of the commitment. But ambition isn't measured by what you promise. It's measured by what you deliver. And you deliver a lot more when your promises are sized to be kept. Think about it. Two different people. The first one promises to run 5 miles every single day starting tomorrow. Big promise. Impressive promise. The second one promises to put on their running shoes and walk out the front door every day. Small promise. Almost embarrassingly small. Now watch what happens over a month. The first person runs 5 miles on day 1, feels sore on day 2, skips day 3, feels guilty on day 4, tries again on day 5, and by day 7 has quit entirely, feeling like a failure. The second person walks out the door every single day, and most days ends up walking a mile or 2 because they're already out there. At the end of the month, the first person has run maybe 3 times and given up. The second person has 30 days of kept promises and a solid habit. Who do you think trusts themselves more now? Who do you think is going to keep going? The one who aimed low and hit the target every day? Or the one who aimed high and missed almost every time? The person who keeps small promises builds an unshakable foundation. The person who breaks big promises builds nothing but a pile of guilt. And guilt, I want you to understand, is not a building material. You cannot build a life out of guilt. Guilt feels productive because it hurts, and we associate hurting with doing something meaningful. But guilt over a broken promise doesn't move you forward. It just makes you dread making the next promise, and it makes you believe the next promise a little less. So if you've been breaking your promises to yourself, I want you to consider that the problem might not be you. The problem might be the size of the promises. You might be a perfectly capable person who has simply been setting yourself up to fail by promising more than any human being could reasonably deliver. Now let's talk about something else that breaks self-promises. And this one is subtle, so I want you to pay close attention. The reason a lot of promises die isn't the size, it's the vagueness. Most people make promises so blurry that there's no way to know whether they kept them or not. Someone says, I'm going to be healthier this year. Well, what does that mean? When have you kept that promise? When have you broken it? There's no line to cross. There's no moment where you either did it or you didn't. And a promise with no clear line is a promise that can never really be kept, because it can never really be measured. A real promise has an edge to it. It says exactly what, exactly when, exactly how much. It doesn't say, I'll exercise more. It says, I'll walk for 20 minutes after breakfast. It doesn't say, I'll work on my business. It says, I'll make 3 phone calls before 10 in the morning. Because when the promise has an edge, you know at the end of the day whether you're a person who kept their word or a person who didn't. And that knowing is what builds the trust. Vagueness is where good